Good afternoon and welcome to Starseed Tarot. I hope everyone's doing well today. So just had a thought that came to my mind, a topic rather, that I'd like to discuss here. So the title of it is going to be Word Choice as Reflections of Subconscious Thought Patterns. Okay, so for the purposes of illustration in this video, I'm going to categorize people into two groups. The first being those who speak liberally and freely, and those who are more restrictive in their speech. Okay? And I'm going to discuss how that reflects their subconscious thought processes. Okay? So, to start off, excuse me, many times the words we use or we choose to use, they're spoken without a sense of gravity. Now, what do I mean when I say sense of gravity? Right? Probably the first thought that comes to mind is, the scientific concept of gravity, right? Perhaps Newton's law of gravity. But in this instance, what I mean to say when I say that our words should have a sense of gravity is that they should hold some weight, shouldn't they? We should mean what we say and say what we mean. And similar to Newton's law, don't mind me, I'm just looking down at my notes as I speak. Similar to one of Newton's laws, right? Which is what goes up, like if we were to take a ball and throw it up in the air, what goes up must come down, right? And I think the same applies to our word choices, right? So if we put an intention out into the universe, that we would like an intended outcome. That's only half of the equation, of the manifestation equation, right? The other half is translating that 5D thought into a 3D reality. Okay? And if we throw a ball up in the air, similar to Newton's law, what goes up must come down, right? So, the part that must come down, in this case, we can conceptualize it as our intentions being spread out to the masses, right? And we need to really examine how our 5D thoughts can be translated into the 3D, right? By grounding our desires. But how exactly can we ground our thoughts into reality, right? I think first and foremost, we need to make sure that our will is aligned with what's meant for us. So take, for example, maybe you've always thought in your mind, oh, one day I could be a doctor, or I could be a hairdresser, or a singer, right? It's not only about having that 5D thought, but it's about understanding whether you do or don't have the aptitude for those dreams. Right? In the case of wanting to be a doctor, for instance, certain thoughts, and it's not to say that you limit yourself with these thoughts, but it's that you be realistic and you just think, what are the steps that I need to take, right, to manifest this desire? So, in order to become a doctor, you have to kind of think to yourself, do I have a scientific frame of mind? Am I able to quickly grasp concepts and translate them into useful knowledge? Can I apply what's been given from a textbook to everyday real life? Because in everyday life, as a doctor, it's not going to go by the textbook, is it? You're going to have to adapt and change based on the circumstance. And I think the same applies in terms of people's spiritual evolution. Okay? It's not that you can't achieve your desires or your dreams. It's about taking those steps to making them a reality. And part of that is reflecting on that aptitude, right? If, for instance, you really do desire to be a doctor, what needs to be put in place to make that a reality? Even if aptitudinally you're not quite at the bar that you think you're supposed to be at, what steps do we have to take to get there? Right? And you have to think as well, is this a dream that's my dream? Or is this something that I have been programmed to go towards? Because I promise you, if you go towards a career that isn't meant for you, you will experience tower after tower after tower. Because it's not in alignment with your actual destiny. Okay? Now, another thought I wanted to bring forward is that in order for spiritual evolution to happen, we do also need to consider our patterns of thought. Every individual comes predisposed with a set mindscape, so to speak, right? Now, being intuitives or being spiritual, we operate more out of certain mindsets than we do others. So let me just start here by talking about the 4 patterns of thought. Okay, the first is logical thinking. So logical thinking, what is that? It's an act of analyzing a situation and problem solving. Looking at the situation objectively and making rational conclusions as to how to proceed. So let's say, for example, it's hot outside and you happen to be eating an ice cream cone. You realize that the ice cream is melting because it's hot outside. That is a logical conclusion that's been drawn, right? And let's look at the second type of thinking, which is correlative thinking, right? That's more spontaneous thinking. It's driven by intuition. And as spiritualists and intuitives, we are driven by that type of thinking, right? It's not a step-by-step, rational, logical process all the time. It just comes to us. And we're able to describe situations from a depth, right? Or we form certain conclusions and we don't know how we got to that conclusion, but it ends up being the right conclusion. Okay? Now, the third type of thinking is lateral or divergent thinking. So that's about questioning assumptions and approaching problems by questioning those assumptions. So if, for instance, you feel that the earth is just flat, it's flat, right? That is an assumption based on the reality that you see. You're not at an aerial field of view high enough to see that actually the earth is round, right? And it isn't perhaps until you go for a trip to outer space, perhaps, if you're lucky enough to take a trip to outer space, that you get to see that the earth is actually round. So the fourth type of thinking, I did want to discuss that as well, is lateral or divergent thinking. So that's about questioning assumptions and approaching non-conceptual thinking is what I was trying to say. So non-conceptual thinking, it's referred to what's felt versus thought out. So as spiritualists or intuitives, we focus more on the correlative thinking and drawing those conclusions and the details of events without going through that logical process. And we also draw on non-conceptual thinking, which is more what we feel rather than what we think. But for those who are watching this content, I would like you to understand that a lot of our thinking, if you're trying to apply that to a future career path and what is right for you, what you need to understand is that depending on the career that you're going towards, there is either one of those four domains of thinking that need to be highlighted, right? So that would be either logical thinking, correlative thinking, lateral or divergent thinking, or non-conceptual thinking. So it's up to you to reflect on your personal situation, right? And trying to adapt your way of thinking to evolve to that next step of your spiritual evolution to get yourself on the career track that you need to get onto. Okay?